Catherine pressed his four-fingered hand against the cold glass of the viewport. His pale blue scales caught the harsh light of the orbital repair station. Below him, in Dock 7, sat something he never expected to see again in his lifetime. A human ship dotted was old. Very old. The kind of ship that should have been turned into scrap metal 20 years ago. Its hull was covered with black burn marks and rough patches where someone had welded new metal over old wounds. This ship had seen many battles. This ship had survived when it should have died. Catherine knew this type of ship. He had seen pictures of them when he was young. His mother had shown him, her eyes wet with tears she tried to hide. "My father died in one like this," Catherine whispered softly. His voice was so quiet that his translator device barely caught the words. A heavy hand slapped his shoulder. His supervisor, a large Gorvian with rough gray skin and a face that always looked angry, pushed a datapad into his chest. "Stop dreaming with your eyes open," the Gorvian growled. "The humans want a full check of their ship. They are paying in Terran credits. Real money. Do not mess this up, or I will find someone who can do your job better." Catherine took the datapad with hands that would not stop shaking. His father, Verdan, had worked on a ship just like this one. He had been a cargo handler, one of the few aliens allowed to work with human crews. During the Boundary Wars, the ship was called the Resolute Dawn. It was lost with everyone aboard during the siege of Karath Prime. Catherine had been barely hatched when the news came. He never knew his father. He only knew the stories his mother told, and the bitterness that grew in her heart as the years passed. Now, at 30 cycles old, working as the lowest engineer on a station that fixed ships for species who looked down on his kind, Catherine was about to board his first human ship. He walked through the long connector tube that led to the cargo airlock. His heart beat fast in his chest. The airlock door opened with a hiss of old machinery, and Catherine stepped inside. He understood immediately why human ships were famous across the galaxy. Every wall was covered with extra systems. Backup power lines ran next to the main ones. Manual switches sat beside automatic controls. Emergency handles and override levers were everywhere he looked. The humans built their ships expecting everything to break. They planned to keep fighting even when nothing worked the way it should. Other species built ships that were beautiful. Clean lines, smooth surfaces, elegant design. Humans built ships that were ugly and stubborn. Ships that refused to die. "You the engineer?" Catherine turned quickly. A human woman stood in the corridor watching him. She was old by human standards. Gray hair mixed with black. Deep lines around her eyes and mouth. But she stood straight and alert, her body ready for danger even in this safe place. Catherine had heard that human soldiers never truly relaxed. Now he believed it. "Yes," he said. "I am Catherine. I will check your ship systems." The woman studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved over his blue scales, his facial markings, the shape of his skull. "You have Carithian markings," she said. "Your people fought with us in the Boundary Wars." "My father did." The words came out before Catherine could stop them. "He died." Something changed in the human's face. Her hard expression softened just a little. She looked at him differently now, like she was seeing something that surprised her. What was his name? Verthan. He served on the Resolute Dawn. The woman went very still. For several seconds, she did not move at all. Then, slowly, she reached out her hand toward him. Catherine knew this gesture. It was how humans greeted people they respected. "I am Captain Sarah Chan," she said. "I think you and I need to talk." She turned and walked down the corridor. Catherine followed her, his mind full of questions. Why did she react that way to his father's name? What did she know? The Resolute Dawn was destroyed 30 years ago. There were no survivors. Everyone knew this. Captain Chun led him through the ship. They passed crew members who nodded at her with respect. Catherine saw humans, but also other species. A tall Thesalian with purple skin. A Gorvian with kind eyes, very different from his angry supervisor. Even another Corethian, a young female who looked at Catherine with curiosity. The ship was called The Last Light. Catherine saw the name painted on an inner wall. The letters worn, but still readable. They stopped at a small room. Captain Chun opened the door and stepped inside. Catherine followed and felt his breath catch in his throat. The walls were covered with pictures. Holographic images of faces, hundreds of them. Humans, yes, but also aliens. Gorvians, Thesalians, and Corethians. His people. We keep the names, Chun said quietly. Everyone who served with us. Everyone who fell. Catherine's eyes moved across the wall of faces. Then he saw it. His heart stopped. His father's face looked back at him. VO are single quotes then. The name was written below the image. The face was young, much younger than Catherine was now. But it was clearly his father. Catherine had seen this face in his mother's old photographs. He had memorized every line, every scale pattern. How is this possible? His voice broke. The Resolute Dawn was destroyed. There were no records. No survivors. Nothing. Chun pulled a chair from the corner. Sit down, Catherine. He sat because his legs would not hold him anymore. Chun remained standing, her arms crossed over her chest. The official records say the Resolute Dawn was lost during the siege of Kareth Prime. That is not entirely true. She paused, and her eyes grew distant, like she was seeing something far away. The ship was lost after the siege. It stayed behind to protect the Corethian civilian ships that were running away from the battle. 300,000 of your people escaped to safety because that ship held the line for 6 hours against an enemy fleet. Catherine could not speak. His whole body was shaking now. Your father was not just a cargo handler, Chun continued. In the last hours, when half the bridge crew was dead, he took control of navigation. He planned the escape routes for your civilian ships. And when the captain ordered everyone who was not needed to leave, your father refused to go. He stayed until the end. She reached into her jacket and pulled out something small and metal. A human medal, dark with age. This belonged to your father. I have carried it for 23 years, hoping to find someone to give it to. Catherine took the medal with trembling hands. He could barely read the words through his tears. For valor beyond the call of duty. Everything he believed about his father. Everything he believed about humans. Everything he believed about himself. It was all about to change. Catherine sat in the small memorial room for a long time. The medal was heavy in his hands. Heavier than metal should be. It carried the weight of 30 years of lies. Captain Chen gave him time. She stood quietly by the door, watching him with patient eyes. Humans were not known for patience, but this woman seemed different. She had learned to wait. I do not understand, Catherine finally said. Our histories tell us something very different. They say the humans retreated during the siege. They say your people left us to die. They say my father was a fool for trusting your kind. Chun's face hardened, but not with anger toward him. It was an old anger, pointed at something else. Someone else. Your histories were written by the Council of Nine, she said. The same council that signed a secret peace agreement with the Dominion. The same council that needed someone to blame for all the death and destruction of the war. She walked to the wall of faces and touched one of the human images gently. We were easy to blame. Most of us were dead or scattered across the galaxy. We could not defend ourselves. We could not tell our side of the story. Catherine looked at the medal again. The human words were strange to him, but their meaning was clear. His father had been brave. His father had been a hero. His father had died saving his own people. Why did no one tell us the truth? Because the truth was dangerous. Chun sat down across from him, her old bones creaking. The council needed your people to hate humans. It made their peace with the Dominion easier to accept. If you knew that humans had died protecting Carithian civilians, you might ask difficult questions. You might wonder why your leaders abandoned the alliance. You might demand answers they did not want to give. Kethran thought about his childhood. He thought about the lessons he learned in school. Humans were violent. Humans were untrustworthy. Humans started wars and left others to finish them. He had believed these things his whole life. His mother had believed them too. She had died believing that her husband was a fool who wasted his life serving creatures who did not deserve his loyalty. My mother hated humans, Catherine said quietly. She taught me to hate them too. She died thinking my father abandoned us for nothing. Chun's eyes filled with sadness. I am sorry. That is a heavy burden to carry. She never knew. She never knew that he was a hero. No, and that is the cruelest part of what the council did. They did not just erase our sacrifice. They made families like yours carry shame instead of pride. They turned heroes into fools and loyalty into betrayal. Catherine stood up suddenly. His legs were shaking, but he needed to move. He walked to the wall of faces and found his father again. Verdan looked young and hopeful in the image. He looked like someone who believed in something larger than himself. Tell me everything, Catherine said. I need to know what really happened. Chun nodded. She touched a panel on the wall and the room filled with holographic light. Images and videos began to play. Records from the Boundary Wars. Footage that Catherine had never seen in any history lesson. He saw human ships fighting alongside Carithian vessels. He saw crews of mixed species working together, eating together, laughing together. He saw his father standing on the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, pointing at navigation charts while human officers listened with respect. Your father had a gift, Chai explained. He could look at a star chart and see paths that others missed. The captain relied on him for every difficult jump. When the civilian fleet needed to escape, it was your father who found the safe routes through the enemy blockade. The images changed. Now Catherine saw battle footage. The Resolute Dawn was surrounded by enemy ships, outnumbered 10-1. Explosions rocked the hull. Crew members fell. But the ship kept fighting, kept drawing enemy fire, kept buying time for the fleeing civilians. 6 hours, Chun said. For 6 hours, that ship held the line. Every minute they survived was another ship full of your people escaping to safety. By the end, half the crew was dead. The engines were failing. The weapons were almost empty. Catherine watched his father on the bridge. Verdan was wounded, blue blood staining his scales, but he stayed at his post. His fingers moved across the navigation console, sending final coordinates to the escaping ships. The captain ordered everyone to the escape pods. Chun continued. But the navigation system was damaged. Someone had to stay behind to manually guide the ship and keep the enemy focused on them instead of the civilians. Your father volunteered. The video showed Verdan shaking hands with the human captain, a gesture of respect between equals. Then the captain ran for the escape pods while Verdan returned to his console. He could have left, Catherine whispered. Yes, but he chose to stay. He knew what would happen. He knew he would die, but he also knew that every second he survived meant more of his people would live. Chun put her hand on Catherine's shoulder. That is not the action of a fool. That is the action of someone who understood what really matters. The final image showed the Resolute Dawn exploding in a ball of fire. The enemy ships turned away, too late to catch the civilian fleet. 300,000 Carithians escaped to safety because of the sacrifice of one ship and its crew. Kethran felt tears running down his scales. He did not try to stop them. "Why did you keep his medal?" he asked. "Why did you carry it for so long?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "Because I was on one of those civilian ships. I was young then, just a junior officer on a transport vessel helping with the evacuation. I watched the Resolute Dawn die so that we could live. I made a promise that day. I promised I would never forget what they did. I promised I would find the families of those who died and tell them the truth." She looked at Kethran with eyes that had seen too much death and too much injustice. "It took me 23 years to find you, but I never stopped looking." Kethran held the medal against his chest. His father's medal, his father's honor, his inheritance. "What do I do now?" he asked. "Everything I believed was a lie. My whole life was built on false history." Chun stood and walked toward the door. She stopped, then looked back at him. "Now you have a choice. You can go back to your life on the station. You can forget what you learned here and keep living in the comfortable lies. Or you can help us change things. We cannot fix the past, but we can build a different future." "What do you mean?" "This ship is not a military vessel anymore. We travel to places where people need help. We rescue those who have been abandoned. We do what is right, even when the galaxy tells us it is wrong." She smiled, and for a moment she looked younger. "Your father believed in something worth dying for. I am offering you a chance to believe in something worth living for." She left him alone with his thoughts, with his father's face on the wall, with a medal that carried the weight of truth. Kethran looked at the wall of heroes one more time. Then he followed Captain Chun out of the room. He had questions. So many questions. But for the first time in his life, he was ready to hear the answers. The days passed slowly on the repair station, but Kethran found reasons to return to the last light again and again. His diagnostic work stretched much longer than necessary. He found problems that needed fixing, then found more problems after those. His supervisor complained about the delays, but the humans paid well, and money always won in the end. The truth was simple. Kethran did not want to leave. Every day on the ship taught him something new. He learned that the Last Light was not a warship anymore. It had become something else. Something that the galaxy did not have a name for. Captain Chun called it a rescue ship. A humanitarian vessel. They traveled to the spaces between empires, to the regions too poor or too dangerous for official help. They went where no one else would go. The Galactic Council does not care about the fringe worlds, Chun explained one evening. They sat in the cramped mess hall, sharing a meal of protein paste and recycled water. The food was terrible, but the company was good. There are not enough resources out there. Too many problems. The council says it is not worth the cost to help them. Kethran thought about his own world. Kareth Prime had recovered from the war, but many Carithian colonies had not. They existed on the edges of civilization, forgotten by their own government. He had never thought much about them before. Now he could not stop thinking about them. "So you help them instead," he said. "We try. We are just one ship with a small crew. We cannot save everyone, but we can save some." Chun smiled sadly. "Sometimes some is enough." The crew of the Last Light was unlike anything Kethran had ever seen. Humans, yes, but also outcasts and refugees from many worlds. They had come together not because of blood or species, but because of belief. There was Dr. Thiessen, a Theslian doctor with purple skin and gentle hands. He had been exiled from his homeworld for treating enemy wounded during a border war. His own people called him a traitor for showing mercy to those who suffered. There was Gorn, a Gorvian mechanic with kind eyes and a soft voice. His family had been executed for hiding human prisoners during the Boundary Wars. He was the only survivor, saved by the very humans his people wanted dead. And there's YRL. She was Carithian, like Catherine. Young and fierce with bright green scales and sharp eyes. She had grown up in a fringe colony that the council had abandoned after a plague outbreak. Human traders had found her, half-starved and alone, and brought her to the last light. "You are one of us," Errol told him one evening. They stood in the engine room, surrounded by the hum of old machinery. "I can see it in your face. The questions. The doubt. What questions? Why do our people hate the humans so much? Why did our leaders turn against the only allies who ever bled for us? Why does the council leave colonies to die while they build beautiful ships for themselves?" Catherine had no answers, but he was beginning to find them. Captain Chen showed him more records. Not the official histories, but the real stories. Video logs from the Boundary Wars. Testimonies from survivors. Evidence of the Council of Nine's betrayal. The Council had made a secret deal with the Dominion. They had agreed to end the alliance with humanity in exchange for favorable peace terms. They had sacrificed human lives to save themselves, then blamed the humans for every failure of the war. They needed a scapegoat, Chun said. The war killed millions. Someone had to take the blame. We were convenient, but some humans survived. Some of you knew the truth. Yes, and we have spent the last 30 years being hunted, harassed, and ignored. The Council does not want the truth to come out. They have built their power on the foundation of human hatred. Chun's voice was bitter, but not broken. So we keep moving. We keep helping. We keep the truth alive in the only way we can. That night, Catherine could not sleep. He lay in his small bunk on the repair station, staring at the ceiling. The metal hung around his neck on a simple cord. He could feel its weight against his chest. His whole life had been built on lies. His education, his beliefs, his hatred of humans. All of it was false. The Council had stolen his father's honor and replaced it with shame. They had poisoned entire generations with propaganda and fear. What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? The alarm shattered his thoughts. Red lights flashed. Warning sirens screamed through the station. Catherine jumped from his bunk and ran to the nearest information screen. A distress call. A Carithian colony called Vestron was under attack. Raiders had come without warning. Ships were burning. People were dying. The colony was begging for help. The station authority dismissed the call immediately. Vestron was outside their jurisdiction. Too far away. Too dangerous. Not worth the risk. Catherine ran to the docking bay. He knew what he would find there. The last light was already powering up its engines. Captain Chun stood at the airlock, barking orders to her crew. The old ship groaned and hummed as systems came online. It was not a graceful sound. It was the sound of something stubborn, refusing to stay quiet. Chun saw Catherine running toward her. She stopped and waited. The colony, Catherine gasped. Vestron. It is Carithian. My people. I know. The station will not help them. No one will help them. I know that too. You cannot fight raiders alone. You have one ship. They will have many. Chun smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had heard these words many times before. We do not fight to win, Catherine. We fight to save who we can. She looked at him with steady eyes. Are you coming? He thought about his father, about the resolute dawn, about 6 hours against impossible odds, about 300,000 lives saved because one crew refused to run away. He thought about his mother, dying with hate in her heart, about the lies he had believed his whole life, about the choice that stood before him now. Stay safe. Stay comfortable. Stay in the lie. Or follow the truth into the fire. Yes, Catherine said. I am coming. Captain Chun nodded. She did not look surprised. Maybe she had seen this moment before. with others who had made the same choice. Then get aboard. We leave in 5 minutes. Catherine stepped through the airlock and felt the last light tremble beneath his feet. The ship was old and tired and held together with hope and stubbornness. But it was alive, and it was going to fight. Just like his father's ship 30 years ago. Just like humans always did. The airlock closed behind him. The engines roared, and the last light jumped toward the stars, carrying Catherine toward a future he could not imagine and a battle he might not survive. But for the first time in his life, it was exactly where he belonged. The Carithian colony of Vestron had been burning for 6 hours by the time the last light arrived. Catherine stood on the bridge and watched the tactical display with horror in his heart. The raiders had complete control of the space above the colony. Their ships hung in orbit like hungry predators, shooting down anyone who tried to escape. On the ground, their soldiers moved through the streets, taking everything of value and killing anyone who resisted. Thousands of his people were dying while the galaxy looked away. 12 enemy ships, said the first officer, a Thistlian named Varan with calm purple eyes. We are 1 ship against 12. Captain, the numbers do not favor us. Captain Chun stood at the center of the bridge, her old hands gripping the command rail. She looked at the display for a long moment. Then she looked at her crew. When have the numbers ever stopped us? She said, battle stations. The crew moved without hesitation. They had done this before. They knew what was coming. They did not run from it. Catherine felt his heart pounding as he took his position at an auxiliary engineering station. He was not a soldier. He was not trained for combat. But he knew machines. He knew how to keep them running when they wanted to die. Today, that knowledge might save lives. The last light surged forward into the battle. The raiders saw them coming and turned their weapons toward this new threat. They were confused at first. What kind of fool attacked 12 ships with one? A human kind of fool. The first exchange of fire nearly destroyed them. Energy beams slammed into the hull. The ship shook violently. Warning lights flashed across every console. But the last light kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to die. Captain Chun used every trick she knew. She flew the ship through the debris field of destroyed civilian vessels, using the wreckage as cover. She exploited gaps in the raider formation, hitting weak points and then disappearing before they could respond. She took hits that should have been fatal and kept going. Around Catherine, the crew worked with desperate speed. Damage control teams ran through the corridors, sealing breaches and rerouting power. The Thistlian doctors set up an emergency medical station and began treating the wounded as they came. The Gorvian mechanic crawled through maintenance tunnels, keeping critical systems alive with nothing but skill and determination. And the ship fought on. Catherine realized something as he worked. The last light was not trying to destroy the raiders. It was not trying to win the battle. It was trying to buy time. Shuttles away, reported the helm officer. Ground teams deploying. Chen had sent landing parties to the surface. Small teams of crew members, armed with medical supplies and emergency beacons. They were not there to fight the raiders. They were there to save civilians. Every minute the last light survived was another group of colonists reaching the shuttles. Every second the raiders focused on this annoying ship was another family escaping to safety. It was the same strategy this Resolute Dawn had used 30 years ago. Hold the line. Buy time. Save who you can. Catherine understood now. This was what humans did. They threw themselves into impossible battles, not because they expected to win, but because winning was not the point. Saving lives was the point. Standing for what was right was the point. A plasma torpedo breached the hull 2 decks below Catherine's station. Fire erupted through the corridor. The suppression systems failed. Smoke filled the air, choking and blinding. Catherine did not think. He grabbed an emergency kit and ran toward the damage. He found Errol already there, fighting the flames with a chemical extinguisher. Her green scales were black with smoke. Her eyes were streaming with tears. But she did not stop spraying, did not stop fighting. "Help me!" she shouted. Catherine dropped beside her and pulled out the emergency sealing equipment. Together, they worked on the breach while fire roared around them. The heat was unbearable. The smoke made it hard to breathe. Every second felt like an hour, but they did not give up. Catherine welded the emergency patch over the breach. Ariel adjusted the chemical mixture and finally killed the fire. They rerouted power through backup conduits, bringing life back to systems that had gone dark. The ship trembled and groaned, but it held together. Another minute survived. Another shuttle full of civilians escaping. "You could have stayed at your station," Errol gasped, leaning against the scorched wall. "You could have been safe." Catherine looked at her. He thought about his father, standing at his console while the ship died around him, refusing to leave, refusing to give up. "No," he said. "I could not have." The battle raged for 2 more hours. The last light took hit after hit. Systems failed. Crew members fell. The ship that should have been destroyed a dozen times kept fighting, kept surviving, kept holding the line, and then, finally, salvation arrived. The Council patrol fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 5 warships, fresh and powerful, finally responding to the distress call that had been ignored for so long. They had been shamed into action by the last light's emergency broadcast. They could not ignore the battle any longer. The raiders saw the new arrivals and knew they were beaten. Their ships turned and ran, fleeing into hyperspace before the Council fleet could engage. The last light hung in space, venting atmosphere from a dozen wounds. Its hull was scarred and broken. Its engines were barely functioning. By any reasonable measure, it should have been destroyed, but it was alive. And its crew had saved over 4,000 colonists. The Council commander's face appeared on the view screen. He was a Carithian, dressed in fine military uniform, with the cold eyes of someone who had never risked anything for anyone. "Human vessel," he said with barely hidden contempt. "You are in sovereign Carithian space. Explain your presence immediately." Captain Chun stood at the center of her broken bridge. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. Her arm hung at a bad angle. She was surrounded by wounded crew members and failing systems. She smiled. "We are doing our job," she said. "You should try it sometime." The Council commander's face twisted with anger. But before he could respond, other voices filled the channel. Colonists from the surface. Survivors on the escaping shuttles. Thousands of Carithians who had watched a single human ship stand alone against impossible odds to save their lives. "They protected us," one voice said. "They came when no one else would." "The humans saved my children," said another. "The humans saved us all." The Council commander had no answer for that. He cut the transmission without another word. Captain Chun turned to look at Catherine. Her old face was tired and bloody, but her eyes were bright with something that looked like pride. "Welcome to the last light," she said. "You did good today." Catherine felt the metal against his chest. His father's metal. His father's legacy. He had finally understood what it meant. The weeks after the Battle of Vestron were complicated. The Galactic Council tried to hide the truth, but too many witnesses had survived. Stories spread through the fringe worlds like fire through dry grass. People talked about a battered human ship that had stood alone against impossible odds. They talked about a crew that risked everything for people they had never met. The Council was furious. They demanded that the last light leave Carithian space immediately. They threatened criminal charges, heavy fines, permanent bans from all civilized ports. They did everything they could to punish the ship that had made them look like cowards. Captain Chun ignored them all. "They've been threatening us for 30 years, she told Kethron with a tired smile. "We are still here. They are still angry. Nothing changes." The last light limped back to a friendly port for repairs. The damage was severe. The ship would need months of work before it could fly again. But the crew refused to give up on her. They patched and welded and rebuilt, just as they always had. Kethron stayed with them. His supervisor at the repair station sent angry messages demanding his return. When Kethron did not respond, the Gorvian sent his final paycheck and a notice of termination. Kethron did not care. That life felt like it belonged to a different person now. He worked alongside the other engineers, learning the secrets of the old human ship. He learned that the last light had been rebuilt 7 times. Every major system had been replaced at least once. The only original parts were the structural bones of the hull and the memorial room where his father's face still hung on the wall. "This ship is like a living thing," Gorn, the Gorvian mechanic, explained. "Parts come and go. Crew members come and go. But the spirit remains. The purpose remains. As long as someone is willing to keep her flying, she will keep flying." Kethron understood. The ship was not just metal and circuits. It was an idea, a promise, a refusal to abandon those who needed help. One evening, Captain Chun found him in the memorial room. He was staring at his father's face, as he often did when his shift ended. "The repairs are almost finished," Chun said. "We will be ready to fly again soon. Where will you go?" "Where we are needed. There is always somewhere." She paused. "The question is, where will you go?" Kethron turned to face her. He had been thinking about this question for weeks. The answer had become clear to him slowly, like stars appearing in a darkening sky. "My mother died hating humans," he said. "She believed the lies her whole life. She thought my father was a fool who wasted his death on creatures who did not deserve his sacrifice." Chun nodded, her eyes sad but understanding. "I cannot change what happened to her. I cannot bring my father back. I cannot undo 30 years of lies." Kethron touched the metal on his chest. "But I can choose what I do next. I can choose who I want to be. And who do you want to be?" "Someone my father would be proud of." He looked at the wall of faces one more time. All those heroes, remembered only by this one ship and its crew. I want to keep their memory alive. I want to prove that what they did mattered. I want to help people who have no one else to help them." Captain Chun smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "That is a hard life you are choosing. The pay is terrible. The danger is constant. Most of the galaxy will hate you for trying to help them. I know. You will lose friends. You will fail more often than you succeed. There will be days when you wonder why you bothered. I know. You will carry scars, visible and invisible. You will see things that will haunt you forever. I know." Kethron met her eyes without flinching. "My father knew all of this too. He chose to serve anyway. He chose to die for what he believed in. I am not brave enough to die for something. But maybe I am brave enough to live for it." Chun extended her hand. The human gesture of greeting, of respect, of partnership between equals. "Welcome to the crew, Engineer Kethron. Your father would be proud." He shook her hand. Her grip was strong and sure. The grip of someone who had held on through countless storms. Wire Owl found him later, as he was moving his few belongings into a small cabin aboard the ship. She leaned against the doorframe and watched him with bright green eyes. "So you are really staying," she said. "I am really staying. Good." She smiled, showing sharp Carithian teeth. "We need more of our people to see the truth. We need more voices to tell the real story. Maybe if enough of us speak up, things will finally change." Maybe, Catherine agreed. Or maybe they will not. But we have to try. That sounds like something a human would say. Maybe it is. Maybe my father taught me something after all, even though I never knew him. 3 years passed. 3 years of missions and rescues and narrow escapes. 3 years of fighting against indifference and hatred and impossible odds. Catherine rose through the ranks. His skill with machines saved the ship more times than anyone could count. His knowledge of Carithian space opened new routes to colonies that needed help. His steady presence calmed frightened refugees and inspired younger crew members. When the old chief engineer retired, Captain Chun gave the position to Catherine. He wore his father's medal pinned to his uniform, right beside his own service ribbons. The last light became famous across the fringe worlds. Not famous in the official histories, but famous in the stories people told each other. Famous in the gratitude of those who had been saved. Famous in the hatred of those who wanted the truth to stay buried. The Council of Nine continued to hunt them. But other Carithians began to question the official stories. Young people asked why humans were so hated when human ships kept appearing to save Carithian colonies. Cracks appeared in the wall of lies that had stood for 30 years. Change was slow. Change was painful. But change was happening. And then came the day when the last light dropped out of hyperspace above another burning world. Another colony under attack. Another impossible situation. Chief Engineer Catherine ran his final checks and reported to the bridge. The ship was ready. The crew was ready. Captain Chun stood at the command station. She was old now, older than she had been when Catherine first met her. But her eyes were still sharp, and her spirit was still unbroken. 12 enemy ships, she observed, looking at the tactical display. Sounds familiar. Catherine smiled. His father's medal caught the light of distant stars. We have beaten worse odds, Captain. That we have. Chun turned to face her crew. Humans and aliens stood side by side, united by something stronger than fear. United by belief. United by love for all the forgotten people of the galaxy. All hands, battle stations, Captain Chun commanded. Let us go save some people. The last light surged forward into the fire, because that was what humans did. They fought for those who could not fight for themselves. They stood when everyone else ran. They refused to give up, even when the universe told them they should. And now, Catherine understood. That was what he did too. His father had passed down more than a medal. He had passed down a purpose, a legacy, a way of living that transcended species and hatred and lies. The ship shook as the first weapons fire struck the hull. Alarms screamed. Crew members shouted orders. And in the middle of the chaos, Catherine felt something he had never felt before. Peace. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Following in his father's footsteps, not into death, but into meaning. The last light flew toward the enemy fleet. One ship against many. Hope against despair. Love against hate. And somewhere, across the great divide between life and death, Catherine knew his father was watching and smiling.